Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll get started in just a minute or two. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our VCCA's General Assembly Legislative Preview webinar. We're really glad you've joined us today. Just a couple of opening announcements before I turn it over to Dr. Bob Kitchen, VCCA's Vice Chair of Advocacy, who's going to lead the webinar today. Just a reminder that this will be recorded today and be made available to all of you on our website or in follow-up links afterwards. If you'd like to review any of the information, we'll be covering a good bit today. And hopefully all of you are aware that this is being done in advance of our upcoming Advocacy Day being held February 2nd and 3rd. It will be virtual this year. We tried for an in-person event, but felt the need to return to a virtual setting given the status of the pandemic. But we hope you'll be able to join for that event. It's going to take place on Wednesday, February 2nd. We'll have a little programming, training, some guest speakers and networking opportunities from 6 to 8 p.m. We'll have legislative meetings taking place Thursday morning from 9 to 12 on February 3rd, and then we will gather for a lunchtime debrief and recap of our progress that we hopefully make in those legislative meetings. All of you who are registered should have received instructions on how to schedule those meetings, and I encourage you to go ahead and do so. We'll have some follow-up opportunities associated with that as well. But I also want to highlight, if you are not able to attend Advocacy Day, these topics that we're covering today will have relevance throughout the General Assembly session, which runs through March this year in a longer session year. And so we hope that you will take advantage and be able to act on these, communicate your priorities and concerns to elected officials along these lines for legislation that they'll be considering over the next several weeks. So like I said, Bob will be covering lots of topics today. We've made a lot of progress in Virginia in the last couple of years regarding climate policy. That is under threat with dozens of legislative bills that would repeal or dial back on the progress that's been made regarding our state climate policy. So there is a lot to go through. And I just want to say at the outset, before I turn it over to Bob to get started, is that we are not experts on every topic that we're presenting today, and we certainly don't expect any of you to be experts on all of these wide-ranging topics. Legislators and their staff have hundreds and hundreds of bills under consideration. There is no way that they are experts either on these policies, and that's why they depend on constituent communication and engagement to help them know where their priorities and votes should be on these many pieces of legislation. So I'll turn it over to Bob now, who will walk through our legislative priorities, and please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have follow-up questions. We'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A at the very end of this hour-long webinar. You can submit questions throughout the presentation by using the Q&A function in your Zoom menu for whatever on whatever device you're joining from. So I'll turn it over to Bob now, and thank you all for joining again.
John, thank you. That was just an excellent introduction in terms of laying the groundwork or setting the table for our upcoming Advocacy Day. And this is probably the major advocacy function that VCCA has each year, although we have advocacy in a number of areas. And for those who aren't that familiar with VCCA, just want to say that we were founded in 2017 by Dr. Adut, pediatrician in Alexandria, and now a very vibrant organization with about 450 members. And excuse me, there we go. And our work is generally in three areas. It's education and research, community outreach, and advocacy. And our definition relative to advocacy is that climate policy is health policy. VCCA clinicians provide credible, health-based perspectives on climate policy solutions to ensure that policies are made with the health of our citizens and communities as a top priority. So putting climate change in a health perspective will typically get most people's interest. That somebody might be anti-particular positions until they become ill from some, we'll say, climate change associated effect, like asthma worsens. Then next thing they know, they really trust their clinician to help them with this problem. And this shows that health professionals are some of the most trusted professions in the country. And the Gallup organization, this is from 2018, surveyed Americans and said, how would you rate the honesty and ethical standards of people in these different fields? And you'll see that nurses were highest, followed by physicians, followed by pharmacists, the top three categories. So we are a group that have credibility, respect when it comes to communicating messages. And we can speak out in any setting, including testifying in front of legislative bodies, which you can see one of our members doing in the lower right photo. So our Advocacy Day started in 2018, just kind of wanted to walk you through that. And the first one was basically a group of our clinicians meeting with legislators just to talk about the importance of clean energy, clean water, environmental justice policy, also spoke to different committees. But never before had clinicians in their white coats walked the halls of the General Assembly to discuss climate change solutions. Next year, in 2019, we had more than 30 clinicians go to Richmond and meet with their representatives in person. And this year, we actually identified particular bills that we were advocating for that we thought were important for protecting the health of Virginians, such as coal ash storage, expanding access to solar power, and joining the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. 2020, and we then had 25 members, again, meeting in person. We again supported solar energy generation. We were involved in initiating and supporting protection for workers from extreme heat, again, supporting RGGI, and also touting the health benefits of the Virginia Clean Economy Act. And we were fortunate, you can see in the lower right-hand picture, for a group of us to be introduced to the House of Delegates by my delegate, Kathy Tran. And last year, as we are doing this year, thanks to that nasty virus, we had a virtual meeting. And we had 45 clinicians, and this actually went pretty smoothly. I think we're all very satisfied with how this went. And we supported advanced clean car standards, electrification of the school bus fleet, environmental justice, and improved air quality monitoring. So this year we're having our 5th annual Advocacy Day, and as John said, that's in 2 weeks on February 3rd. So just a little description here of what's happening with the legislative process so you can see where our role is, or where we have a possibility for impact. And we'll talk about how bills get introduced and what process they go through to become a law. I'll show you a tool that helps us track legislation, and also an opportunity for advocacy as these bills are being considered. So the legislative session, which is now going on and started last week on Wednesday, is the regular session that happens every year in January. Starts the second Wednesday of January, and in even years goes on for 60 days. Odd years is 45 days. Now, special sessions can be called later in the year, depending on any unfinished business that needs to be taken care of. But some of the important moments are the filing deadline. And this is when the final wording of a bill has to be submitted to be considered. And that is the first day of the legislature, January 12th. But filing of bills actually started as far back as November 15th. So you'll see in the late summer, organizations are starting to really get involved in what they would like their representatives to present, what topics they want, because you have a several month advance or lead up to this. Another date that's important is called crossover. This year it's on February 15th. And the two houses at that time will take the bills that each has passed and send it to the other house. So the House of Delegates sends theirs to the Senate and vice versa. And then the process starts again. And we'll see here that this is the makeup of the House, where there are 100 members, and currently consists of 48 Democrats and 52 Republicans. Had to edit this slide from last year because, as people are probably aware, we had 55 Democrats and 45 Republicans. So there's been a shift in the balance of the political parties in the House. The Senate has not changed. There was no election for senators last year. So it's 21 Democrats and 19 Republicans. And so what's the lawmaking process? Basically, it starts off with, in the General Assembly, the delegate or the senator has an idea for a law. They may have generated this on their own. They may have been approached by organizations, lobbyists, et cetera, in terms of what they would like to have in the way of legislation. After the member has the general idea of what they want and the components of it, it actually sent to the Department of Legislative Services to craft into the language that's required for the bill. Then the bill is sent to committee. In the House, the Speaker makes the determination of which committee the bill goes to. In the Senate, there's a clerk who does that. And this committee will hold public hearings. Now, let me jump back to the first one about creating the bill. An example of where VCCA had a role in this was 2 years ago, when we were creating legislation or interested in legislation to protect workers from extreme heat. We became a member of a coalition within the Commonwealth of multiple organizations who were also interested in this. And we found a sponsor, a delegate, to help with that. And so we had a role there, an opportunity to influence that. Then when we get to the committees, that sometimes can stymie your efforts. Again, a couple of years ago, when we were definitely supporting the solar freedom bill, when it came time for the committee to consider it, it was voted down 8-7 along party lines. So frustration at that time. But anyway, then if it gets out of committee, then it goes to the chamber, the House and the Senate, and is either accepted or voted down. And then it can go through the crossover process. And ultimately, if the bill is approved by both houses, then it can go to the governor, and who can sign it into law or can do a veto. And there's actually an opportunity for the General Assembly to review vetoes come April. So where's there an opportunity for advocacy? That you can go ahead and try to convey your thoughts and ideas and interest, maybe influence that legislature, certainly when the bill's being created, and then also when it's in the committee. You can also reach out at that time, and there's an opportunity for testifying. Okay. So basically, if you're going to be involved in advocacy, here are just some general ideas of what's important. And things we want to keep in mind as we're meeting with our legislators on Thursday the 3rd. Have an ask. It's one thing to come across with a general idea of what you're looking for, but basically the ask is, we would like you to support this bill, or we need such and such done. Know your target audience. That's a very interesting one. Depending on the particular party of the delegate or senator you're speaking to, you may have a different emphasis of what's in the bill. Let me give an example, maybe the solar freedom bill. If I'm talking to one party who maybe is more interested in the actual impacts of climate change, talk about how increasing solar energy for homes, et cetera, will decrease greenhouse gas emissions. Whereas another party might want to hear about the economic benefits, how solar business can increase within the state, how people can be trained, there'll be more jobs. So it kind of helps to know your target audience in terms of what you want to emphasize when it comes time to ask them to support the bill. Don't assume they know everything about it. Now, you don't have to spend an inordinate amount of time describing it, but be ready to provide information. This is an interesting one. Don't feel intimidated. Remember, these are our elected representatives. They work for us. Tell stories, not just statistics. I have to acknowledge Dr. Adut. Whenever I've heard her speak in multiple settings, she typically will incorporate the story of a patient that she has cared for who's had some impact through some climate change related negative effect. And this actually helps to make it a more human story. Be prepared with necessary materials and information. I think John has referenced that we will be forwarding to participants various documents that you can have available. If you don't know what the question is, don't try to baffle them. Just say, well, not sure about that. Let me research this. I'll get back to you. Which is actually a nice opportunity to continue the channels of communication. Keep it short and to the point, and recognizing that a lot of the meetings that are being set up are only 15 minutes in length. This will be particularly important. You don't want to shoot the whole 15 minutes without getting down to the ask or what you really think is important here. Asking for a commitment, that's basically back to the ask, and then follow up and build a relationship. It's always nice to later thank the delegate senator or their aide for the time, offering to providing additional information. Anyway, these are all good things to keep in mind for effective advocacy. And this is just a slide to kind of emphasize some of these. Explain why you care, identify yourself as a constituent. That's very important if they know you vote for them, and give them a hard ask. Don't debate. If you're getting into this and somebody maybe is taking a contrary method, contrary view, maybe acknowledging that, but you're probably not going to win a debate at that time. And then just bring up facts. We talked about the importance of stories, but opinion maybe isn't as worthwhile in this setting. I did want to identify this particular tool, which I find really effective, very interesting and useful when following what's going on in the General Assembly. And this is called the Legislative Information System, or Virginia LIS. And one of the last slides, I'll give you the link to this. And you can look up any bill that's being introduced. It'll tell you the text, tell you the patrons. You can track the bill as it goes through the General Assembly, including into committees. It'll tell you what actions have been taken. If a committee votes, it'll tell you how that vote went, who voted on it. It'll identify amendments. You can look up the bills by their number. You can look them up by their sponsor. If you want to see what your particular delegate or senator is introducing, you can see all the legislation they've introduced. This is quite interesting. People might want to keep this in mind as we either approach Advocacy Day or even afterwards, knowing that we have talked to Delegate Center about particular legislation, we can then track it after Advocacy Day to see how it's going. So I recommend this. I think this is a very informative tool. Okay, so our focus is we're going to have two areas of focus for Advocacy Day. One is identifying what we think is important previously passed legislation that we would like to remain intact and to be protected from any opportunity or any efforts to roll back. One's the Virginia Clean Economy Act. The second is RGGI participation. And the third is clean car standards. Now, the Virginia Clean Economy Act was passed 2 years ago by the General Assembly, and a very significant piece of climate change legislation. It will transition our electric grid to 100% clean energy by mid-century. It is to lead to the closure of coal and oil-fired electric generating plants by 2024, biomass plants by 2028. And it has several targets, energy efficiency programs. So the utilities are supposed to decrease energy usage per this formula. An example is that Dominion, they have a 1.25% energy efficiency target, increasing each year to 5% by 2025. So compared to 2019, there should be 5% less energy sales or energy usage. RPS is Renewable Portfolio Standard, and it has to do with the amount of renewable energy that has to be produced on a yearly basis through 2045, in this case for Dominion. And so it starts in 2021, and it says that there has to be a 14% renewable energy production of the energy supply, of electricity supplied, which will increase to 100% by 2045. It also increases net metering limitations so that the restriction that would put on the amount of electricity could come from net metering of solar panels, et cetera, is being raised. And this was just some comments about VCEA. First one's particularly important. If passed, the legislative authority cannot be overturned by future executive authority. And so this is important, that executive orders can't overturn this, but it also means we need to pay attention to legislation now being introduced that might negatively impact this, because legislation can overturn previous legislation. Okay, and so what I've done here is list some of the bills that appear to be challenges to the Virginia Clean Economy Act. Now, I had just gone through the bills on the LIS page and pulled out those that, to my viewing, look to be ones that could challenge VCEA. Some of them are actually trying to shut down the program in its entirety. Others are little nibbles, or what I call death by duck bite. But we have to have our eyes open here that there are going to be significant attempts to water down or eliminate VCEA. And this is what we need to ask of our legislators, to protect it and do not allow these bills to become law. Next is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And this shows a map of the RGGI states. There are 11 RGGI states. And just a quick description here. There are states in New England and Mid-Atlantic and have put a cap on CO2 emissions from the power sector. The electric power plants, fossil fuel, are required to have allowances, and there's a system where these allowances are purchased on a market, and each state has allowances that they make available. So Virginia has been successful in reducing its pollution, but we've also had a significant monetary benefit from RGGI. And in our first year, we got an additional $228 million in revenue, and it's being used for more energy efficient housing, helping low-income families reduce their bills, and enhance community flood prevention and protection efforts. To just show you some of the numbers, for the energy efficiency in terms of affordable housing, we see that nearly 30% of Virginians spend 30% or more of their income on housing, and these are low-income people. So that's a big chunk. Just at the very bottom line. So with the money that was allocated to affordable housing, just the initial round, there were 11 grants approved and will lead to 705 energy efficient units, and there are currently applications for 30 more projects. And then weatherization, it's estimated that in Virginia, a well-weatherized house will save $976 on electricity bills, and about 166,000 Virginians live below the poverty level, paying this amount of their income and energy cost. And there are weatherization programs, but there's a little bit of a kicker there that if there are repairs that are needed, which may delay the weatherization, the home is deferred, but then the owner has to pay for the repairs, and that often can happen. But through RGGI, over $15 million was allocated to help with these repairs, and over 1,000 homes were repaired and have been removed from the referred list. And then a significant problem in Virginia due to climate change is flooding, both in the coastal area and inland. And in RGGI, almost $8 million were awarded to help for grants to help protect against flooding. So the challenges to RGGI, I think we all are aware that on the day of his inauguration, the new governor signed an executive order saying that Virginia would withdraw from RGGI. There's some discussion whether this can occur legally. And these are a couple other bills, again, some that just want to make changes in RGGI, which will remove some of the teeth from the bill, or some that actually seek to overturn it. And finally, advanced clean car standards. Kind of motor through this, but basically it comes from 1970 Clean Air Act, where California had stricter air pollution controls. And at that time, it was said that California can get a waiver for that, and any state that wants to adopt those same controls can do so and not be in violation of clean air standard. And there were 13 states who did that. And so last year we passed just a map of those states. Last year we passed legislation that said Virginia would join that. And the bill said that these would take effect for model year 2025. So we're not yet actively in this in terms of our vehicle fleet being impacted by this, but we have committed to this. And so one thing it does is mandate that a greater number of zero emission vehicles be sold in the state. And there are also stricter standards for pollution control. Now, these might be some bills. There are a couple here that are identified impacting the Air Pollution Control Board, trying again to weaken its ability to function, which may have an impact on clean car standards, but certainly on other climate legislation. So we need to be diligent. I think a lot of Democrats feel that this is a year that it's defense, 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 to quote an article in Virginia Mercury. So we all need to be supportive of our legislators in terms of trying to prevent these laws from weakening the progress we've made over the last 2 years. So what's coming up? Future legislation or legislation for us to also support. This is both a Senate and a House bill, solar ready roofs and net zero schools. Senate Bill 452, powers of local governments, additional powers, energy efficiency of buildings. Senate Bill 160, electric utilities, clarifies definition of energy efficiency programs, and then funding of the previously passed electric vehicle grant program. So the first one, solar ready roofs and net zero schools, introduced by Senator Favola and Delegate Subramanian. And this says that new public buildings, state agencies, institutions, and schools will have solar-ready roofs. They have to have the infrastructure, the roof structure, such they can support this. They also need to be ready for EV charging infrastructure, and they need to have the ability to track energy efficiency and carbon emissions. And additionally, it says that new schools should be built, maintained, and operated to generate more electricity than consumed. This is a significant bill. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Next is from Senator Boysko, and this has to do with putting in place legislation which allows jurisdictions. This is not going to be a state requirement, but it's going to authorize jurisdictions, local jurisdictions, to set higher building standards than required by the state, require the building's energy use intensity be disclosed at point of real estate sale, and also large commercial buildings report energy intensity and create incentives for owners to improve energy efficiencies. And the objectives are to increase energy conservation and reduce energy usage by 15%. The necessity for this bill is something called the Dillon Rule. It states that local jurisdictions, unless the power is stipulated in legislation, don't actually have the ability to enact certain standards or requirements. So this is a way to allow, say, Fairfax County to enact some of these policies. Next is something that defines the energy efficiency programs, and two senators, Hashmi and Boysko, are introducing it. Low-income energy efficiency programs may switch from fossil fuel to electric heat, provided that the electrification measures reduce total on-site energy consumption. And this would help fund the removal of their dirty tanks in their yards and help with indoor air quality. And then finally, a bill that we're supporting has to go, like I said, to last year's electric vehicle grant program introduced by Delegate Keem. And this was to support electrification of school bus. And just some statistics that we used last year. It shows that an electric school bus decreases greenhouse gas emissions equivalent to 54,000 pounds per year. And it's the same as removing 5.2 cars from the road. Air quality inside a diesel bus is 5 times worse than outside that bus. And the other important point at the bottom is that the maintenance costs or operating costs with this electric school bus is 60% less over the lifetime of that bus compared to a diesel bus. So Delegate Keem has introduced this bill because last year when it was passed, a paragraph was added that said that state funds could not be used, state monies could not be used for this fund unless it was fully covered by a federal or outside grant or funding. So basically there were no opportunity to apply this fund program to help school districts. So he's trying to start by saying, let's authorize state funds to at least convene a work group to develop recommendations and establish criteria for this program. So it would be a start. We would like to see him be successful with this. So if you haven't yet registered for Advocacy Day, you can go to VCCA's homepage, virginiaclinicians.org, and you'll see right there on the homepage an opportunity to register. And then a description, as John said, we will have a Wednesday evening event we're calling the orientation webinar. You'll be getting a link for this webinar as you've registered. And we'll start off with Dr. Adu, just again, introducing VCCA and Advocacy Day. I will have a short section talking about messaging for our meetings with the legislatures. And we have 2 guest speakers who are excellent. Harrison Godfrey, who is with Virginia Advanced Energy Economy, Emily Francis, who's with the Southern Environmental Law Center. I'm looking forward very much to what they have to say. And then we will have our virtual meetings on Thursday morning. If you received instructions on how to schedule these meetings, participants will be assigned to the meetings by constituent if possible. A VCCA lead, hopefully an experienced VCCA member with Advocacy Day, will be identified to organize and direct the meeting. We're asking that advanced meetings be set up either by Zoom or just email discussion to talk about roles and the messaging. And we're going to send out materials in advance to participants. And then come Thursday morning, John and I will be on a Zoom starting about 8 o'clock to answer any questions that people may have as they lead into the 9 to 12 o'clock segment when you'll have your meetings. And we'll follow that with a review at lunchtime, talking about how the meetings went, lessons learned. Hopefully we'll have a lot of good feedback from that. So here are the emails for myself and for John, should you want to get in touch with us before Advocacy Day with any questions or thoughts. And also, this is the link to sign on for the Legislative Information System. So thank you. And are there any questions? And John, anything you'd like to add to this?
Bob, that was absolutely fantastic. I can't believe how much information you covered in 30 minutes or so. We've had some great questions come in over the Q&A function, and I would encourage all of you to submit your questions now, since we've got a bit of time to cover them. But just to respond to a couple initially, we had a question come in over chat about the job loss and growth in this transition to a clean energy economy. And there are a lot of helpful resources out there. I put a link to an article that is, probably 6 months or a year old, and I'm sure there are more recent updates than that. But the job growth from the solar industry is tremendous in Virginia. It's one of the top, we're one of the top quickest growing states in the country, due in large part to these pieces of legislation for growing the number of solar related jobs. In addition to that, as you all have seen from the headlines, Dominion Energy is investing, I think it's around $10 billion in offshore wind off the coast of Hampton Roads. And there are many windmill manufacturing jobs that are being generated from that for the Hampton Roads region. So the job growth and the potential job growth, if this trend continues, is really tremendous. And while I don't have the exact numbers, I know that it far exceeds any job losses from the existing power plants that would be phased out over time due to this legislation. So we'll be sure to include some of those resources and statistics that you might want to raise in your meeting if that's a point of interest for you in these. We also had a couple of other questions about how do we fit all of these asks into a 15-minute meeting. And I completely understand that that is a daunting task. The good news is that your 15 minutes is not your only chance at communication with these. And in fact, if you don't have an existing and ongoing relationship with your legislative offices, this is the perfect chance to start that. But this should be a back and forth throughout session. So yes, we will have, virtual meetings take place in a couple of weeks with our Advocacy Day, but I certainly hope that it's not the only virtual meeting that you take it upon yourself to set up with your elected officials throughout session. Or if it's not a virtual meeting in the future, it can be continued email or phone call correspondence to continue highlighting these priorities. So if you don't get to all of the talking points in your brief meeting, that is perfectly fine. And you can follow up with a thank you for meeting me. We did not get to raise all of the points that we hoped. Here is the list of priorities and our recommendations. And we'll provide that draft text that you can use in that correspondence for you. But I would say overall, because of the sheer magnitude and number of bills that we're dealing with, Bob highlighted just a few on each slide that threaten the progress and Virginia's status on the Clean Economy Act and RGGI and clean car standards. But that is just a small fraction of the bills that fall into that category of either chipping away or repealing some aspects of those big bills that we supported. So we have a long list of bills that we would like to see legislators take positions on. But overall, most legislators are aware of this offensive and defensive struggle, given the new party dynamics that have presented in our General Assembly this year. And so if you are meeting with either a Republican or Democrat, say, as a clinician, as a health professional, I care about addressing climate change with strong policies. I have previously supported Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, the Clean Economy Act, and the clean car standards, knowing that will help us protect health for Virginians now and future generations. We don't want to see any attempts at altering or repealing or chipping away at those priority pieces of legislation. And if you would like a list of legislation that might do that, I would be happy to provide that in follow-up. So that can take care of a whole host, and the majority of our focus in these meetings will be on defending those policies. And then we have, as Bob identified, we have 4 bills that we would like to see passed and enacted that we think would improve our climate policy. And if you can quickly mention those and the basic gist of them after we provide talking points, that's great. If you don't get to all of them, that's okay too. So we'll provide ample resources so that you can manage that. Anything?
John, I was going to jump in for just a second there. Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that my purpose for showing the bills that we considered to be challenges was just to give everybody an idea of the scope of the, I guess I'll call it, threat. It wasn't that I would expect people to identify individual bills, just knowing that it's important to say we need to protect, as John said, these 3 pieces of legislation. And so I was going to, if it's okay, I was going to go ahead and address a couple of Sarah's questions here. Talking about narrowing down to 1 to 2 specific asks, that's very important. I mean, like John said, you just name 4 bills. Here's what we think is important. And then a quick statement about 1 or 2 of those. I think most of this is to actually, if you're going to meet with your legislator, that's wonderful. Most of the time it's been with an aide, but to make a connection with that person, have them appreciate your sincerity for dealing with climate change, identifying the particular bills. You could mention 1 or 2 with just a simple little summary or statement. And if you need that, we're going to provide talking points, but you can also go to the LIS, and each of the bill has maybe a 1 or 2 sentence summary as it starts off, and ask if that legislature or the aide needs any additional information and follow up with that. And Sarah, you're asking about slides. I probably wouldn't do that. I think the face-to-face interaction probably is more important for these meetings in terms of connecting. And also, like I said, it gets kind of impersonal, and maybe it gets to be overloading with facts and stuff. So let's see. I think that takes care of Sarah's question. So Sarah, if any more, let us know. John, do you have some others that you want to bring up there?
No, I think that was perfect, Bob. I would just say, Sarah and everyone, if you only get that one, if you only have 15 seconds for an ask, it's will you commit to defend Virginia's climate progress with your votes on these various bills which threaten the progress? And can we count on your support for these 4 other bills that we've highlighted, or these 2 other bills that we've highlighted, whatever you get to in your meeting time, to support climate progress in Virginia? So it is a full slate this year, where previous years we've had it's been very easy to kind of look at the bills that have a direct connection to climate and health and identify a list of 3 to 4 priorities. This year is a very different atmosphere that we're facing in the General Assembly, and so have to be a little bit broader in our messaging, but know that specificity can come in follow-up phone calls, emails, and further conversations that you all have with your legislators. And so I think that these will be productive meetings, even if the response is absolutely not. You cannot count on our support for everything that you have presented. The fact that that they are made aware that they have constituents that have these concerns that they need to think about representing, that are going to be either future donors and voters for them or for their opponents, is just an extraordinarily important part of the civic responsibility and process that we all have a role to play in. So there is no such thing as an unsuccessful advocacy meeting. Showing up is all that's required for success on these issues, and then you build that over time with follow-up and building a closer relationship. Even if you are a constant thorn in your legislator's side because you don't agree with their priorities or votes, having them consistently hear from you it has power. The tides turn on these issues, and sometimes it takes many years of repeated advocacy. Reggie, for instance, has been a priority. I remember when I first joined VCCA and Dr. Adut said, we need to join Reggie. My advice to her was, that's not going to happen for at least 5 years. And it happened about 2 years after that. I was absolutely wrong. The tides turned faster than I thought that they were projected to. And so all of these are very important points, and just your personal presence is what carries the most power, more so than the data and facts that you might present. Your presence and your stories that you bring to that meeting are where the power lies.
I wanted to just add something. I responded to a question of Sarah's. I didn't mean it to go, the question to go away. Sarah Wolford asked about job losses in the coal industry, and there is a site, statista.com, which is an industry monitors industry employment. It appears, I think it's a reliable site. According to them, Virginia only has 2,094 coal jobs now, and the big drop happened way before the Clean Economy Act. It happened between 2012 and 2016. And that was because of the transition, from coal to natural gas. So I think in fact, the dramatic loss or decrease in coal mining jobs happened before. I mean, that's a national trend. It's not because of the transition to clean energy. And with only 2,000 current jobs, or 2,900 in coal mining. And I think we saw that there's how many jobs in clean energy now? I think there was like 60,000. Is it 88,000 now in Virginia? So it's hard to argue that it's harming employment.
Absolutely. Any more final questions from participants before we close out? We certainly hope that you've found this valuable as an introduction, and we'll certainly follow up with additional details, as we've said, and Bob and I are going to be on Thursday morning on just an open Zoom call. If anyone has final questions after reviewing all of these. But again, whether you're participating in Advocacy Day or not, or viewing this, recording after the fact, we're here as a resource. We're happy to track down information that you need. And we hope that you'll find opportunities to advocate both through our organization, our partners, and just of your own accord as we try to continue the progress that we've seen Virginia make on climate policy in these past few years. All right. Well, thank you all very much. We'll close out here for today and look forward to follow up in other formats. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Bob.
Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.